Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and we're getting an update today on Cosa Resources, traded on the TSX-V under the ticker COSA, and on the OTCQB under the ticker COSAF. And we're joined today with the president and CEO of Cosa Resources, Keith Bodnarchuk. And Keith, last time we had you on the show, just about a month ago, we kind of gave people a nice intro to the company, but you have a huge land package in the Athabasca Basin and you're exploring for uranium targets. And we really focused in on your Ursa project. It's currently the high priority target, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the flagship because you have so many other targets to test. So I thought today it might be fun to start off with maybe giving listeners just a snapshot of all the different land packages that you have around the Athabasca Basin, not just in the Cable Bay Shear Zone, but just peppered all over the place. Maybe walk us through some of the key properties in your eyes that you're excited to go out and explore in the next year to two.
Yeah, no, certainly. And great to be here again, Chad. It's one of those things we've always taken that approach of the drill it and kill it mentality and making sure we do have that pipeline of opportunities and pipeline of exploration projects and really drill targets because we are the same team that discovered the hurricane zone for ISO Energy. That was one of the quickest stories really to discovery, but it was the seventh project. And so it's important to have that pipeline of projects. And so that's the approach we took with COSA when we built it. And obviously, Ursa, we touched on a lot last time covering the Cable Bay Shear Zone. But an interesting way that we pieced together this land package is that Steve Blower, our chairman, who has a really good track record of discoveries, he says that, locally, these deposits are really difficult to find, but regionally, there is a pattern to them. You have this string of pearls really that exist on the east side of the Athabasca Basin, where you have these long linear northeastern, what we call uranium corridors. We can map down from MacArthur River, past Griffin Phoenix down to Key Lake. And so Steve said, let's get as much ground as we can within these interpreted uranium corridors to really set ourselves up best as we can for success. And obviously, Ursa is within one of those major corridors, being the Cable Bay Shear Zone. But Orion is another project that's close to it, and that's actually an extension of the, I guess you'd call it Laroque Lake corridor, which hosts the hurricane deposit that we found during our time at ISO Energy. And so that continues down. But interestingly enough, it's also the convergence of an east-west trend that continues off from Cigar Lake. So you really have the coming together of, I'd say, two different trends that converge on our Orion project. And when we originally did our airborne geophysics over Ursa, we did cover the Orion project since it's close by, and we did develop an interesting target that we are deploying A&T over currently. And it's really setting us up to be able to drill it in 2025. Importantly, we really expanded the Orion project earlier this year with a deal with Canalaska, where we acquired a decent piece of it, which really contains a lot of that extension of the Rock Lake trend, which continues on down from Hurricane Zone. So that's really a major project for us too going forward. Another one I'll touch on is Aurora. So that's one we transacted on at the end of December last year. It was a very value creative and cost effective acquisition, where it's a couple 100,000 shares and maybe about $20,000 for 100% of this project that is about 18,000 hectares. And it's located right next to Cameco's currently operating Key Lake mill. It's 18 kilometers away. It provides a good counterbalance to our Ursa and Orion projects, which are on the deeper side and which are really targeting that tier one size deposit. Aurora, it's part of it doesn't even have sandstone cover. It hasn't really been explored since the 70s. But interestingly enough, the holes that were drilled in the 70s, they make reference of interesting structure and alteration and pretty interesting results that they were hitting back then. It's just one that hasn't been followed up and hasn't seen that modern exploration. And it's one where we are doing airborne geophysics over top of it right now, actually. And, we will update the market on that shortly. But that one will be drill ready by 2025, because when you have these shallower targets, you don't need to do all those different layers of geophysics in order to target, because it's more cost effective to get out and drill, because we're looking at 100 to 150 meter holes. There's good road access right to it, so it is a project that you can explore in a really cost effective manner, and we are excited to get out to Aurora in the near future. Then we obviously have a few different ones, Helios, Orbit. These are all projects that we managed to piece together through staking when ground becomes available. And so we're always looking to upgrade that pipeline. I think we have a lot of strength maybe through 1 through 6 of these projects, and we're always looking to upgrade to make sure we keep focusing on making that discovery and kind of flip through these assets until we ultimately do.
Well, and Keith, just to that point, so again, that's why you really haven't established what the flagship is going to be yet. I'm also just going to include for people listening a graphic or a map that shows really all the Cosa Resource Corp land package, because there's a lot of other projects you didn't even name there still. There's Charcoal, there's Castor, there's Eclipse, there's Solstice, there's Polaris, there's Helios, there's all these other projects. And so it gives you, I guess, comfort in that, like you said, in the drill it to kill it mentality. If you go to one property and it's not working out, you don't have a shortage of properties and you could work up other targets on those other properties. But the three that we're really going to stay focused on for this interview and for the balance of the discussion is going to be Ursa, Orion, and Aurora. Let's go back over to Ursa since that is right now going to be getting the lion's share of the work in the near term. You do have a drill program that's going to start up in August, and it's following up on the winter drill program where you drilled 3 holes. Maybe walk people through the winter drill program. Out of the 3 holes, one hit the kind of mineralization you're looking for, and then that's going to be the focus of this follow-up program.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when we acquired Ursa, which is covers 60 kilometers of the Cable Bay Shear Zone, we knew that we weren't going to be able to systematically explore this thing because it's too big and you would essentially fall over trying. It's just too much ground to cover. So what we did is we applied mobile MT airborne survey, which identified 10 key target areas and really brought down that 60 kilometers down to about 20 kilometers of target areas. And then what we did, we went in and did ground geophysics over top of 5 of those 10 areas. And we landed on this Kodiak target area where I think what's interesting about the Cable Bay Shear Zone is it's kind of that last great northeastern trend, which hasn't seen a significant discovery yet. And our thesis is that's because it just hasn't seen a lot of exploration. And so when you don't have much exploration, you also don't have much data to go by to help guide you when you're drilling. So we have unlimited space, but we also didn't have that much information. And so when we landed on the Kodiak area, we compiled a lot of the historic boulder sampling in the area, and it created an anomaly right next to this Kodiak target area. So it ticked off another box, added another layer to really strengthen that as our first target area. And so we had this broad anomaly from the geophysics, and we went and drilled 3 fence holes. The first 2 were interesting, but mostly background. Then the third hole, like you mentioned, did get into significant structure and alteration within the sandstone. And it looks like one of those ones where it's a bit of a classic overshoot of the optimal target area, where we hit this alteration higher up in the sandstone, and it really projects down to about 120 to 150 meter step out to really test that alteration halo, and structure goes down to the optimal target area, which would be the unconformity. And for your listeners, unconformity deposits are, Cigar Lake, MacArthur River, Phoenix, Hurricane. So those are a lot of the significant deposits on the east side of the Athabasca Basin. That's how you ultimately target them. And when we were at ISO Energy, when we discovered the hurricane zone, it was a similar type story, right? Where we saw this interesting structure and alteration higher up in the sandstone, projected that down to the unconformity, and that's where the group ultimately hit hurricane deposits. So this was a great first result for us, and it's really helping guide us for this upcoming drill program in August. But with that, we do have a good follow-up target area right now, but when we do follow this up, we have to know which direction to go from there. Do we head to the northeast? Do we head to the southwest? So that's why we're applying ANT as we speak to help guide us for that drill program in August.
And I'm going to also include a graphic from your slide deck that really shows a cross section, and it shows where the unconformity meets the basement rock, but also, the sandstone up above it, where you may have that halo effect, and where that drill hole UR24-3 went. And then obviously, like you just mentioned, you're going to be testing the thesis around that to really see which direction to go, because now it's about determining the direction of the trend. I guess for people that are not familiar with uranium discoveries and even some of the deposits you mentioned, I guess just tell them why your team got so excited about the hole that you hit, because it does remind you of the hurricane deposit, but it's also what you were hoping to find in a drill program. And like you say, it's such a huge land package. To have narrowed it down to these targets and to have hit really out of the first 3 holes is pretty impressive. But why are you so excited on the follow-up here? What could it mean as far as the size of a deposit and the grade of a deposit that can come from one of these targets?
Well, I think, anytime you enter into a new area, most exploration geologists will tell you that you're probably going to drill background holes, at least for the first initial few drill programs. And for us to hit one with significant alteration structure this early on was a huge win for us, and somewhat surprising, I would say. considering we just started, like you said, it's our first three holes as a company. And so I guess why do we really get excited? Because I mean, the Athabasca Basin is home to those highest grades, most valuable rock in the world, really. And when we were at ISO Energy, the Hurricane deposit, ended up being the highest grade deposit in the history of the Athabasca Basin, right? Where an average grade of a deposit outside of the Athabasca Basin might be about 0.1% uranium. The average grade of that deposit is 35% uranium. And so it's phenomenal the grades you can hit. And so going back one step, why did this excite us? Because, we do have a group that's seen quite a few deposits in the Athabasca Basin itself. And in these alteration halos, which are often associated with these deposits, there's certain ingredients you look for in those halos, things like dravite, which is an important clay, bleaching of the sandstone, maybe sulphides along fractures, things like pyrite. And this alteration zone that we hit in UR 2403 showed a lot of those key ingredients. And so that's what really excites us, right? And so, for considering this is a first program, we're, really excited to go up and follow it up. And hopefully we're onto some sort of trend here where we can eventually hone in onto another deposit.
Well, and Keith, you brought up the pedigree of the team, and the team is a lot of the same members from ISO Energy, where you would work together making the hurricane discovery. But you also have some experience, and the team you included with Denison, and then Craig has some experience with NextGen. So I think it'd be important again to reiterate the team behind here, this geologically looking at this understanding. This is not your guys' first rodeo. And then you also just added a new team member. So I guess give us a quick update on the team and the background on some of the discoveries some of these gentlemen have made.
Yeah, for sure. So I did get my start at Denison. Like you mentioned, I was there for 10 years. Had the privilege of working on the Phoenix deposit, which is their deposit that they're working towards putting into production. I also spent time in the Griffin deposit and really had exposure to looking what it's like to make a discovery and take it through, those resources. And, really was privileged to work with a great team of geologists they had there at the time. That's actually where I connected with Steve Blower. Steve Blower was the VP of exploration of Denison when they discovered the Griffin deposit and expanded Phoenix. And then, I moved on, took an MBA, ended up joining ISO Energy as Corp Dev and reconnected with Steve Blower, who obviously was the VP of exploration at ISO when he led him through the hurricane discovery. So I think, we've really had our fingerprints on a lot of the success in the basin over the past 20 years. And what that does is it allows you to have familiarity, right? It allows you to see what a deposit looks like, maybe how about a kilometer away from it or 500 meters away from it, and start to see these subtleties in the core that can help guide you. And it also importantly shows you when to walk away, when you're not close to something, when you aren't seeing those key ingredients you look for. And so that could really increase your efficiency. And so I think, we bring that pedigree, and even myself, and we have a much stronger technical team than myself. And I've seen hundreds of holes at Phoenix. I've seen a lot of holes at a lot of these projects. And so us having that ability to reference that past success and apply it to what we're looking for here, I think is a huge advantage that we have, especially considering the size and stage of our company. You mentioned Dan Hrabik. So Dan Hrabik joined the group as a senior project geologist. Dan has spent his entire career at Orano, which is previously known as Areva, which is a French government. They're really, them along with Cameco, are really the two major companies in the Athabasca Basin. And I think our team has had a tremendous amount of success with discovery, especially in the junior world. But it's good to get that point of view coming from a major company that Dan can bring. And it's kind of that missing piece almost that our team didn't have, was that major company approach that Dan can bring to our technical team. And so, yeah, great addition. We're excited to have him. And it just, of all the companies I work for, this is the strongest technical team I've ever been a part of. And so we're extremely excited about what we're going to do here.
Well, and I don't want to camp out too long on the team, but I think we have to mention maybe two other people on the management team, and that's Andy Carmichael, who's the VP of Exploration, and Justin Rodko, he's the corporate development manager, but he also has a pretty extensive geological background and worked with you guys at ISO as well. So maybe highlight those two team members on the management team.
Yeah, for sure. So Andy, I worked with him previously at Denison, and then he moved on to become a senior project geologist at ISO Energy. And him, along with Steve and actually Justin, were the discoverers of the Hurricane deposit. And then when a few of us moved on to ISO Energy, Andy stayed on there as the VP of exploration, and he led them through their initial resource, which I mentioned is the highest resource in the history of the Athabasca Basin. And so, those guys have had a significant discovery under that belt, and they remain hungry and wanting to do it again. So I think, top to bottom, left to right, however you look at it, we do have that that strength in a team. And Andy and Justin are a massive part of that.
Well, I appreciate you breaking down some of the gentlemen on the team and their background geologically and why they're excited about what you're looking for at Ursa. But again, there's two other projects I kind of want to hone in on in this discussion, and that is you're going to be doing some work later in the summer at Orion and Aurora. Let's maybe start with Aurora and some of the work you'll be doing there for the summer plans.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Aurora is shallower targets, so we will just be doing airborne geophysics over top of it. That'll be gravity and EM. And we're comfortable in that with those kind of depths to go in and target airborne geophysics alone. There's not a need to necessarily get out on the ground there just due to the depths. It makes more sense to put those dollars directly into drilling. And so those targets will be ready for 2025. And it does, like I said, provide that counterbalance to the deeper targets we're going for at Ursa and Orion that we can kind of go into Aurora and drill these shallower targets. And so we are excited about that project. Like I said, it came into the fold at the end of last year, and so we're really just starting to understand it more and more. But it is one that the team is very excited about. And Orion is interesting, right? It's one where, like I said, it has the convergence of the Laroque Lake trend, which comes down from that hurricane deposit, ISO energies, and then it also has the east-west feature that comes in from Cigar Lake, and they converge on this project. And it's one of those areas that just hasn't seen much attention. And I think groups like us are heading to these areas that are previously unloved, and we're going to these underexplored areas because that's where we know the next tier one deposits will be sitting. And so, it's one where we really like the trend. We did fly some airborne geophysics over top of it when we did the original Ursa one, and we did identify one massive anomaly that's sitting there right on this bend in the geology. And that's why we're applying A&T over top of it right now at the same time while we're doing Ursa. And that's one where we'll have a target ready for 2025. So it just adds to those pipeline of projects. Orion is extremely exciting, same with Aurora. And like you said, ISO Energy is one of those quickest stories to discovery, but it was the seventh project. And so it's important to have the target generation, really this pipeline of targets. And, we'll continue to go where the best targets are. And at the end of each drill program and of each exploration program, you recalibrate. You look at, okay, maybe we should be heading here. But, what we've seen at Ursa early on, there's no reason why we shouldn't keep going back to that area, especially with UR 2403, as you mentioned, showing early signs of potentially being onto a significant alteration area. So, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you breaking down all three projects. And then I think it'd be nice to also shift over to the financial side of the company and the cap structure and some of the key stakeholders and just how things are positioned. Give us a quick overview of the financial health of the company, but also who are the key stakeholders?
Yeah, so cap structure wise, we are a newer story. So we do only have just under 57 million shares outstanding. Shareholder base, management and advisors, we own about 23% of the company. We continue to participate in private placements, buy on market. I think we're all strong believers in what we're doing here. Then we also have about 31% would be funds and strategic investors. So the funds would be long uranium funds. There's about 5 or 6 that are currently involved in our company, and they're ones who don't necessarily participate in juniors at our level, but we do bring that past relationship with them, having created a lot of value in the past with our previous companies. And these are guys that are going to continue to support us into the future. And so, from a cap structure standpoint, and really from a float standpoint, we're only sitting about 46% retail. And so, we are tightly held, and it kind of recreates that similar situation as to what we had at ISO when it was extremely tightly held and we managed to have success. That's what catapulted it from 30 cents to $6.50 on the back of that discovery pre-resource. And so when you kind of create this tightly held company and manage to have success, it can really set up for the share price to really take off. Cash wise, we're sitting north of $7 million. We're fully funded for 2024 and beyond. And so in great shape, really heading into this summer drill program.
Yeah, some great points there. I think it's so important to have a tight capital structure if you really want the stock to respond to drill results that are positive. I mean, any company can respond, but it really is an accelerant, especially when there's only 46% of the float available to retail, because management having such a huge position, 23%, I think people listening should make a note of that. There's a lot of management teams that have 0% or 2 or 3%. To have basically almost a fourth of the company in management and directors' hands is a strong statement. And to have those funds already positioned in such an earlier stage company because of the pedigree of your team and the past success also is a pretty big statement. So it does set you up to have a good response if you're able to provide the pay dirt, Keith. So we'll keep following along with the news as you put out more results. We'll keep following along with the team as you test different targets. And if anybody has the interest in following along with the news, definitely click on the link below this interview. It'll take you right over to the website, directly to the company news site, and we'll keep following along here at the KE Report. Keith, keep us posted and looking forward to our next conversation.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Chad.